We're back on Triumph Talks with one of my all-time favorite authors, John W. Peace, who has been on the show prior with his best-selling book about his grandfather, who was a B-17 bomber pilot during World War II, in a book titled A Boy from Cracker's Neck. And now John is back to talk about another book that he wrote. Now, where A Boy from Cracker's Neck is the true stories that his grandfather told him, this book is the possibly true story that were told to him by all those folks that live around him up in the Appalachian Mountains, where he lives in Big Stone Gap. This book is titled The Kioki Triangle, and it was a #1 Amazon bestseller. This is based on folklore, something that actually did happen, but it's one of those things we're not sure what is true. But John, with his great storytelling abilities, took this and ran with it. So, John, thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Well, first of all, you're my all-time favorite book editor.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah, and the one thing, like you pointed out, my first book, A Boy from Cracker's Neck, was really my papaw stories. And I wanted to get them down and share them with people and kind of preserve them for my grandkids and beyond. The Kioki Triangle was kind of more of a book about some of my stories, some of my experiences with characters and in the coal fields and stuff. My whole career has been in business and sales of some form or other. And so, I got to travel a lot in the coal fields, met so many people throughout the coal fields. When I say the coal fields, Eastern Kentucky, Southwest Virginia. I traveled a little bit in that southern part of West Virginia, but it's mainly Eastern Kentucky and Southwest Virginia. So that was kind of the inspiration for writing the Kioki Triangle. Now, the one true story, the overarching story of the heist is true.
Yes. So let me bring up my first question.
Okay.
Which is just right where you're headed.
Okay.
I like to bring up. So I just would like the audience to know what inspired you to write this book. And I did leave out some really important things about the book. One, it has romance.
Yes.
Adventure, mystery, and it at times is absolutely hilarious. I'll share that I was reading the manuscript to my daughter. I was driving her back to college. We had a long trip. And I was reading her the manuscript. I hadn't read it before. And I was laughing so hard reading it out loud that I was crying, and she was just looking at me funny because I couldn't quite get it out. It's very funny. And I know that some of the humor comes from your life. So I hope you'll touch on that as well.
Oh, I sure will. And of course, getting back to the inspiration.
Yeah.
I first heard this story, the crime heist story. Gosh, it's probably going on 20 years ago. A good friend of ours has departed this world several years ago. His name was Dink Shackelford. He first told me about this crime story. Probably took place in the late 70s. And you got to remember, the late 70s in the Virginia coal fields was kind of like the wild, wild west. You had an absolutely coal boom. So you had the coal business really making more money than they could count. So if you could dig coal, sell coal, you were making money. And then also you had the, kind of the natural labor conflict with the UMWA. And then, I heard about this crime story of these coal miners who had a grievance with the coal company and was stealing this huge, huge strip job equipment. Now, this is earth moving equipment, Caterpillar dozers, Caterpillar loaders and stuff. So this isn't like stealing a little truck or stealing some tools from the coal company. And because this is a great picture of it. This stuff is huge. And they haul it, and they get in contact with this is the late 70s, early like South America cartel. And they sell this equipment and they haul it all the way across the state of Virginia. And I'm talking about from west to east. And sell it to the Columbia cartel. And so this story just stuck in my head for years upon years about the audacity of these coal miners to pull off this heist. I mean, just to even think about doing it and planning it, I just found it fascinating. So, and so I took the overarching story, and then of course the details and stuff is fiction and stuff. But I just thought it would make a great story.
So the details are fiction, but you definitely put characters in the story that come from your life.
Yes.
And that's a trick, I guess you could call it, that most storytellers do, is they'll base different characters around someone that they know, and then they're able to build the different things they would say or do around the fact that they know that person.
Yeah.
And that's true of quite a few of the characters in this book.
Yeah, and the characters are all based on true people. Sometimes I just change the names a little bit and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had this conversation with people that have read the book, and I've heard so many more news stories since then. For some reason, the coal fields, especially Eastern Kentucky, Southwest Virginia, and I'm sure it's the same in West Virginia, we've produced such larger than life characters. And one guy says, when you move mountains for a living, you're going to have a big character. And that's what these guys do. And the humor, okay, it was not hard to write the humor because these guys that I met were that funny, and they weren't comedians. They weren't jokesters. Their life was just hilarious. And their thought processes of, well, I mean, if they could think of it, they would just do it.
And I don't know if we should give away any of your funny stuff, but one of my favorite scenes was a character that was working for the mining company, and he drives up, and they're protesting,
yes,
because they've been kicked out, and his way of getting them to clear the way to let him through was very unorthodox.
And I'll tell you that character was based completely on my father-in-law, my son's granddad.
You want to talk about that character a little bit? I think he's one of my favorites. There's so many favorites, though. But
wonderful. I mean, one of the finest men I've ever met in my life. And when I describe him in the book, he was 6'2", 6'3", probably 6'3", that tall, lanky, but with those lean, muscles that came from working from the time he was, 10 to 12 years old. And actually grew up working in the apple orchard. And so, worked from the time he was a toddler, and then, dropped out of school, went in the coal mines. Now, when I say dropped out, extremely smart guy. I mean, he could do electrical stuff, and he'd have electrical engineers call him for advice. So he knew that business. And, one thing I'm very proud of was my son and his uncles, his sons, after reading the book, talking about the way I described riding in a truck and him smoking those Camel cigarettes and the long ashes. And I'm going to go ahead and give this away and stuff. I mean, it would just mesmerize you because they would be so long.
You're just waiting for him to fall off.
Yes. And you'd be going, how are they hanging on? And they, and his sons told me, he said, that was as spot on with him riding a truck with him as you could ride it. So I'm very proud of that. And, that's like that humor right there. He wasn't trying to be funny, but it was just hilarious.
It's hilarious.
To go on adventures with, and truly, if you did something with them, it was like an adventure. It wasn't just going to work or doing this. I mean, so, hilarious, just wonderful character in the book, and just a wonderful character in real life. And
how great is life when people's just their mannerisms and their way of living and thinking is just so out of the ordinary from what that you're just entertained, and this is really letting your readers take a step into the world that you grew up in. And I think that it's something that definitely people will appreciate, because we have had a television show that was very popular. I would say it's actually one of my favorites, called Justified.
Yes.
With Raylan Givens and all of the quirky, wacky
Boyd Crowder. Yeah.
Boyd Crowder, smart, clever. Your book could become the next iteration of that show, really, and picking up the characters that you have.
And let me tell you, I'm gonna mention Justified. Talk about it just a little bit.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know who all the writers were on Justified, but they at least had one or two writers that either knew the area or was from the area very, very well, because there was certain small things that maybe even the average viewer didn't see, but you had to know this area or be from this area to kind of catch what they were talking about. I think in one of the first episodes in season 1, Raylan Givens comes in and his boss asks him if he wants to go get something to eat. And Raylan says, "Oh no, I picked up a chicken biscuit from Hardee's." That is Southwest Virginia, Eastern Kentucky, a chicken biscuit from Hardee's. And then there was other just the way they would word stuff, and some of their slang was right out, as we would say, right out of the holler.
Let me bring up a map that you sent me that
Yeah.
shows where Justified took place and where your story, which has the word Kioki in it, takes
Yep.
place.
And that is actually the map of Kioki where this heist actually took place. And I know on that particular map, it looks like a long ways away, but it's literally just over the mountain range.
Yeah.
So when you're in Harlan, if you go across the mountain range, you'll be in Virginia and you'll be in Kentucky, Penton Gap. So, you know, that whole series, TV series, was really about here, about where I grew up, and my true characters in my book. Some of them worked over there. You know, definitely had relatives over there. So, you know, we really enjoyed that TV series. And the great thing I like about the TV series, and I also try to put in a book, was even though these characters, you know, they had these funny kind of mountain quirks and slang and stuff, but the series, and I hope I wrote that in the book, these people were smart people. And, you know, so many times we're portrayed as, you know, hillbilly bumpkins and not that smart. And the characters in Justified, I mean, Boyd Crowder, yes, he was that backwoods mountain guy, but he was a smart dude.
Yeah.
And they portrayed him that way. Yes. And even the bad guy,
in your book, especially by the end, because you've got two characters on the front cover, and one is the detective who's not from the area. So she sort of, I think of her as representing us. How would we feel and how would we think if we stepped into this other world up in the Appalachians? And she meets the men who pull off this heist that are all what are they, middle-aged former heroes of the high school.
Well, probably not quite middle-aged, but in their late 20s. I mean,
late
you know,
20s. Okay. I guess I was just I'm middle-aged, so I guess I was just sort of putting my age to them, because you're actually not real clear. But yeah, so she steps in, and I mean, they're young, I guess middle-aged. I don't think middle-aged is
yeah.
but anyway, and it's so funny to see how they get her. Like, by get her, I mean they pull the wool over her. They basically make it. She finally just is like, wow, these people really are banded together, and they're hard to crack.
The loyalty, you know, and there's been some other stories where they go back to the Trail of Lonesome Pine that was based in this area. So you have this outsider that comes in our tight-knit community. And, you know, in my book, you know, they think it's an open shut case. They got evidence, go down there, put the screws to somebody's going to rat on each other. And that's, you know, we've all watched the crime stories, and that's how they solve the case. They get somebody to turn witness and all that. And, you know, the outside FBI agent comes down, and there's just no fear of these locals from an FBI agent. I mean, they just almost don't pay her no mind when she's threatening to bring them in front of a grand jury, because their loyalties to their friends.
Well, and what I love about it is their best technique, really, for completely disarming her, is to just pull her in and make her one of them. And there's some great scenes that happen in the beauty shop, and all the conversation and how she gets treated. And so, and like I mentioned, there's a romance, which is really, really fun too. So it definitely, women will love this book, but I think men will love it just as much, because it's so much like Justified in a lot of ways. So let's just talk for a minute about your cover and your title. I think that you've got a phenomenal cover. I'm really proud of it. I'll bring it back up. And kind of where the inspiration came for that.
Well, you know, the inspiration came, you know, the Kioki you see at the top of the cover was where the heist took place. You know, the Norfolk shipyards is where they shipped the stolen equipment out of. And then, of course, we've got Bogota, Colombia. So you got the cartel that they were selling the equipment to on the one corner. And then, of course, being coal mine country, you know, that's kind of showing down a coal mine. And then, of course, you got the silhouettes of the two main characters. Yeah. And Mitch, you know, I always envisioned him as just that, you know, big, strong coal miner type. And I didn't want to add, too much detail, so I thought doing the silhouette was a good way. You could tell who he was and what he was doing without a lot of details, and let the readers kind of fill in what they think is a handsome coal miner. And then, of course, you got Deborah, which is the FBI agent who comes in and enters this world of Southwest Virginia and the coal fields.
Yeah, it's a very effective cover, I think. It draws you right in. It definitely carries that mystery with both the silhouettes and the light shining at the end of the tunnel, which has a little bit of a triangular shape. So I'm proud of that. Well, I enjoyed your book so much that I'm really happy that you actually have a second book in what's the Kioki Triangle sequel coming out. And it has every bit as captivating a cover. This one is titled Ghosts of the Moonshine Mafia. So you want to share a little bit about that book and when you think we might be able to expect it?
Yeah, I'm still finishing it up. When I first wrote Kioki Triangle, first of all, I never expected to think about doing a sequel to it. But as I wrapped it up and stuff, I've enjoyed these characters so much. And in my mind, I kind of had a backstory. And then when I went and kind of reviewed the Kioki Triangle, there's actually some Easter eggs that I'd kind of put in there by accident. So I just kind of played on those. And going back to, Mitch's dad had gotten killed in a coal truck accident when he was in high school. So I kind of played on that of going, well, what if it wasn't an accident? And then kind of leading on and stuff. And then I wanted to kind of finish out and round out some characters. I just thought the character arc, I just thought they needed to kind of have that happily ever after moment. And some of them were kind of just left, but I just enjoyed these characters. And I just wanted to write about them a little bit more. And I think they still had some adventures left in them.
Most definitely. Most definitely. I know that when you do finish the book, you've done such a wonderful job of building character and telling the story that you really, like I said, the main character, the Deborah, the detective that comes to town, you identify with her because you're kind of an outsider stepping into this world, and you see how they pull her in, and she just, you want to see her live in that community. You kind of, it's a little bit of a happily ever after ending, and that's great. I think we all need that. But I love the fact that you actually don't stop there, but continue, and then it kind of rolls into something that clearly that cover is a little dark and ghosts and moonshine, and there's just piques a lot of curiosity. So I think it's going to be a great follow-up to
and Kioki, the tone of it's a lot more humorous. Now this one is a little bit more dark because it's more of a revenge story and more getting into feuds and clans. And when I say clans, talking about the Scottish, going back to the Highland clans and stuff. And our areas is full of Scotch Irish. My personal family's from Wales, so we're Welsh, and like in Justified, you saw the same thing about the different families and the feuds. And there's one chapter in Ghost talking about the parlay meeting between the two families.
Yeah,
and that happened in Justified. And in this part of the world,
get your books to
still
whoever
happens today. Yeah,
whoever produced and directed Justified needs to read your books because Justified was such a hit, and I think that. I know they tried to do, well, tried is probably not the right word. They did create a series for Justified that takes place somewhere else. And I don't know, I know you and I kind of started watching it and talking about it together. And I know for me, it just, without it being located up where the original show is, and without the colorful characters, it just felt like any other bad cop, bad guy detective show. And, I just lost a lot. So I'm just putting it out there in case there's any screenwriters out there.
In the reboot, the Justified City Primeval, I mean, the most exciting episode was the end of it when they brought Boyd Crowder back.
Oh, they did.
Yeah, I mean,
I didn't make it to the end.
Okay. Oh well,
and I can see why they had to bring him back because it just was struggling without that character, those people. My understanding, I know this is off topic, but not entirely. My understanding is Boyd Crowder originally was not meant to be in the series as long as he was, but he just resonated.
One episode.
Yeah, can you imagine that? So that shows the strength of the real characters that come from where you live, because we just we love him and his just witty, clever badness.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And then I really think that the characters that you've written into your series are, I mean, if there's any way that I can convey to those who are watching that haven't read your book yet, how good it is. Just think the opportunity to read about Boyd Crowder again, not exactly like him, but with the same quality of character and how much you enjoy seeing, like with Boyd Crowder, I'm like, what's he going to say next? I mean, just
Yeah.
the way he puts things. And in your book, it's just, what's he going to do next? How are they going to overcome this challenge? And it's always just something so unpredictable and clever and just very redneck. So,
Well, I'm gonna bring us. This was back when Justified was going full bore on TV. One of the critics, this was out in LA. I just found it so funny. Said, "Oh, it's a pretty good show, but for them, the characters were too over the top." And I almost had to laugh because I said, if anything, I know characters that they are just like this, and they've toned them down to make them more realistic.
isn't that funny?
And even in my book, the real characters that I knew and grew up with, I've had to tone them down a little bit, because if I actually wrote them exactly the way they were, you would say, I can't believe somebody like that. And I was going to let you know, I had that one reader, gosh, I can't remember. She was out west, and she actually messaged me and asked if these characters were real, or was it just a figment of my imagination. And I'd written them up, and, I had to reply back, no, they're absolutely real. The names have been changed and stuff. And I said, of course, the local, like my son, knows most of the characters that I've written. He go, I know who you're talking about. And
how funny.
actually,
Well,
last night at dinner,
because there's so much creativity. If you just made this up, it's just like, but as is usually the case, writers draw from people that they know, and it really works.
At least I do.
Yeah, really works. Well, I hope to see these books become the next Justified-esque type show. I think it would be extremely successful, which means you need to keep writing more books, because we're probably going to need a few more books to get as many seasons as we got out of Justified. So just very good. So I want to ask now a question that I ask everyone who comes on this show, because I'm interviewing authors, and there are a lot of aspiring authors who watch. And so this is a little different. I usually interview nonfiction authors, and I guess you could say in a little way it's historical fiction. There's based in truth. But would you just take a minute and share what advice you have for aspiring authors, particularly those who maybe are interested in writing something that's more along the lines of historical fiction?
Well, first of all, I never expected to write anything in my life. Never had a dream of that. Never even had an aspiration. But I always loved stories. And I love telling stories, love hearing stories. In fact, last night I was at dinner and just heard some wonderful stories. And, if you enjoy stories, even if you're not a writer, get them down on paper. Because what helped me, the reason why I never thought about being a writer was I was never good at the technical aspect, first person, second person, all that. And should the period and the commas go there? And, I really didn't know the book industry. And I didn't know that's what editors are supposed to help you do. And, the most important thing is the story. And if you got a great story, all the other stuff are kind of mechanics. So get it down, and then go find yourself a good editor that you can work with, so you can, make it a great book. And that's probably my biggest advice. Don't let the technical aspect of, just the crossing the T's and, the periods and complete sentences. Don't let that bog you down. Get the story down. If you got a great story, then you can work on all the mechanics with a good editor. And that's where, Melanie, you've helped me out tremendously. And, I enjoy. So, I just get the story down, kind of give it to you, and then we kind of work it out. And, that's the way it works. I did not know that. And I'm sure there's a lot of other people don't know. There's help out there. And
I think that's such great advice, because never ever hold yourself back. Never say, "Oh, I'm not a good enough writer," or "I can't." Like you said, I don't know the grammar well enough, so I'm just not going to to try it, because like you said, there's people who can come and surround something as wonderful as the stories that you tell. And, great designers make a great cover that are inspired by your book, and you can really succeed. And I know that you're going to succeed with these books.
And let me tell you, AI does not replace good people and good
No,
talent. I mean,
no,
it could help you, and it's fine. I'm not against it. But all the online editors and stuff like it can only get you so far. You actually need a real person. There's just so many little details, tones. In fact, we were just talking about book titles and stuff. So AI can't help you with that.
Yeah.
You have to have a real person and a real editor to do that.
Well, I'm so glad that you came on. I'm glad that I had a reason to bring you on, because this book has really been fun to read and fun to work on, and it's a great time just watching people respond to it as well. And do you have any final thoughts before we sign off?
Enjoyed it very much. Looking forward to finishing this next book and maybe getting it out in the fall or early winter, and just enjoy the stories.
Wonderful. Well, John, you keep writing, because you have a talent for it. And we are really enjoying getting to know your life. You live up in the Appalachian Mountains in Big Stone Gap. Is that right?
Yep, Big Stone Gap.
I want to bring up a picture of you. You're standing here just so people can get to know you a little bit better. Mm-hmm. You're here next to a tractor.
Well, the tractor's on the farm. Yeah.
So you live
the
on
mountains behind me. We have real mountains. Yeah.
Real mountains behind you. And so you've got many different hats that you wear and different roles that you play, as you're a writer, your grandfather, and just a country bumpkin up in Appalachia that tells amazing stories. So thank you so much for coming on. Yeah. And if y'all want to hear any more from John, we do have another show that we host together called Masters of the Air Talks, which is based around his first book. So you can pop over there. I'll put a link to one of our shows at the end of this one in case anyone wants to pop over and see all the stories that you tell and that we talk about that have to do with World War II, with aviation. And we also have a special series going on right now. We'll probably continue it, which is called Masters of the Air Talks Military Movie Club. So we are enjoying watching military movies and just having some great interviews with different guests who have something important that they bring to the conversation. So thank you for coming.
Thank you.